All right. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. And Aaron, we have a special guest today. Actually, he's not just a special guest. Ryan has been on the show multiple times.
3.
He has the biggest fan base that I've ever seen.
Oh, that's true.
Right?
Yes.
Like more
Yes.
comments than ever come when Ryan's on the podcast.
Completely organic, by the way.
Yes, it is organic because it's every single child of his, which amounts to 11.
Yep.
And they're just clicky-clacking about their dad and spreading viral excitement about Ryan Swapp. So Ryan, welcome to the episode. Today we're going to talk about reciprocal tariffs. Specifically, I mean, this is an e-commerce podcast, how it's impacting e-commerce. But I heard that Ireland, that already there's some rumblings of what they're going to do.
What are they going?
And
what are they doing?
they're thinking about Dublin.
Ba-da-ba.
I don't get it.
Do you want me to explain it?
All right. Okay. Let's first off, we know that there's been some a lot of thought put into the math that needed to occur to do this. Ryan, and I know Aaron has a lot of questions too, but just talk to us a little bit about the complex mathematics that went into figuring out the tariffs.
Like you shared a
Wait, well, hold on. All the lead up to this, we had all the ideas of what it could be. It was like, we're going to take into, it's reciprocal. We're going to take into account all these complicated factors, non-tariff barriers, all this stuff. And yet, how do they come up with the rate?
Well, you shared a tweet the other day from somebody that had figured it out, and I can't remember the exact formula, but it was that I think it's the total trade deficit divided by the value of U.S. exports to that country.
I think it's imports. I think it's U.S. imports.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's very simple.
And that's it.
But I was like, okay, you're going to take all those tariff schedules and have your own number associated.
How are you
And then,
that?
I have a theory about this, though.
Oh, I'd like to hear it.
So, leading up to this, and this theory is on the why. Leading up to this, there was all these factors they were mentioning they're going to take into account. How complicated would it have been to go through and come up with the reciprocal for the administration?
Yeah.
If they had to come up with this formula across these.
Line by line for every
How long would that take?
It would take forever.
Yeah.
So when you just throw out a blanket one that just, all right, we got a trade deficit. There's probably a whole lot of complicated things going on why this trade deficit's there. When you impose a big tariff on that country, how many people are helping you solve the problem now?
Yeah. No, a lot.
So you're taking the snow globe, you're shaking it up, and then you get everybody around the world involved in coming up with the right formula.
And this is where I was talking to Ryan about this yesterday. It's interesting because if it had been, we were talking about what was it, sugar coming out of Brazil, right? And how that might look what if we had a reciprocal and they don't care, so they just lower theirs to zero so they can get sell sugar to us at like zero.
Yeah, you can't.
Right, that would have been super complex and problematic.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting about this is it basically, and I'm not saying if the numbers are right, but the principle of it that I think is just fascinating is you basically just turn to the country and say, you figure out how you're going to fix this, right? Like this is just,
you
guys get together on your end. You can figure out how to get this to even out in some way. Again, I don't know if the number's right, but the concept of you can't play a game, you can't play games with it. It was actually in a way, time will tell if this ends up being smart.
I think it's much more.
But I actually thought that it wasn't as bad as my initial thought when I saw it. I was like, oh, well, man, we've done math. That was like the math I did when I started the company. Like, we're just going to do this percentage,
Well, to me, it was a tactic. Because to your point, it's like, okay, we got the trade deficit. That's been a talking point.
Yeah.
So instead of going through this whole complicated thing and going to Vietnam and saying, well, here's all the different reasons why there's a trade deficit that we need to fix. You just say, we're going to slap 46% on you, Vietnam. You tell us how to fix the trade deficit.
Now calling it a reciprocal tariff, that's questionable because that's,
hey, I think the idea is it gets to the end result much faster because you've
that would be the idea. We'll see, right?
So,
it's gonna be.
I don't know what's going to go, but that's my thinking on what the tactic was, and the numbers are just they just came up with a formula to just jumpstart the whole conversation.
All right, so let's talk. Maybe should we talk about U.S. out, and then we can talk about a little bit about U.S. in. right? Because more on the retaliation piece. I know that China today announced that they're doing a retaliation. What else do we know? Do we know some other countries that have been talking about this?
Well, there's other countries that are doing the reverse. And I think the administration has been cautioning people to not retaliate. The Treasury Secretary the other day said that he hoped that people would just kind of sit back and let it ruminate for a little bit what has happened, let the dust settle, and then let's talk. Mm-hmm. And reacting was not the best option. And so there's several countries that, Canada has reciprocated or retaliated. The EU has, and now China has. But there's other countries that are doing the complete opposite, where they've actually come back, which is the intended result, really, of this whole thing is to let's negotiate and try to figure this out. And so Vietnam and I think Israel at least have already or mentioned they want to talk to us about lowering the tariffs into their countries. So there's a mixed bag where countries, some are retaliating, some are saying, hey, let's
for U.S. sellers, though, Canada is going to be by far the biggest impact to them. What's the additional tariff right now that the retaliation into Canada?
It's 25%.
And then China just had they just matched our
34.
super complicated calculation of 34%, right?
Right.
Which is not going to impact e-commerce sellers in the U.S., but some maybe. It'll impact brands that sell in China, right? But not a lot of e-commerce cross-border going into China from the United States. Like it's not a big thing. Yeah. All right.
The Canada tariff though is targeted.
Yes.
Right now, it is a broad swath of products that it applies to, but it's not a blanket 25% on everything.
Yep.
So we're in disarray right now around the world as everyone tries to figure out how to respond, and we're seeing multiple approaches, and that's something I think will be an evolution. But should we talk a little bit about what actually is happening and how what's going on with these reciprocal tariffs? First off, when it comes to the reciprocal, I want to segment, like there's been some things with automotive stuff and everything that's already in play. We're talking in this press conference that came out, he had a small board up because it was windy, so he couldn't use the big board.
Right.
So he went with a small board that had a list of all the reciprocal tariffs, all these different rates. And then he also talked about just kind of a 10% like floor that's going to be across the board. And then there's some carve outs. Like I'm trying to make sure I wrap my head around all of it, but let's talk about timelines real quick. When does the first shoe drop on the reciprocal tariffs?
So that's going to be tonight.
Okay, this episode, so if we get this out, here in a few hours, today is April 4th at midnight.
Yep. So it'll be midnight tonight when the clock turns
April
to
5th at midnight.
April 5th.
12:01 a.m.
Sorry,
on April 5th.
Yep.
Yeah. So that 10% will apply to every single country. And then on April 9th, the I don't have a term for it, enhanced reciprocal tariffs will apply to another group of countries.
Is that the ones that were on his small board?
No, well, if you look at those boards, those included 10%ers and the enhanced ones as well.
Okay.
So there is a separate list that we have that shows the countries that have the enhanced.
And that is that the Annex 1 inside of the executive order. Okay.
There's also some excluded HS codes that are listed in one of those.
So there's some exceptions to this then.
Yep.
Okay, so we're talking. All right, make sure I've got this tonight, or really when it turns to April 5th, 10% across the board. Mm-hmm. This is in general, and then we'll talk exceptions. And then a few days later, on April 9th, that 10% increases to 46% for Vietnam, 34% for China, et cetera. And those are all listed in the annex, right?
Right.
What are the exceptions to this?
So the exceptions, I haven't looked at the entire list, but a lot of it seems to be products that are already covered under other additional tariffs, like for steel and aluminum, things like that. And
I think it's lumber,
chemicals,
energy.
Lumber, yeah.
Okay.
So there are things that are already being hit by other additional tariffs.
Where do you find the list of these HS codes and these commodities?
Well, in the executive order, there's a link to Annex 1 and Annex 2, and it's in one of, I can't remember which one. I think it's Annex.
I think it's 2.
2.
I think it's 2.
Yeah. So it's in there.
And then aren't there some exceptions for Canada and Mexico stuff too?
Yeah, the way I understand it is that if it's a USMCA qualified good, then it doesn't apply. That's about all I know about that.
So it's pretty much U.S. and Mexican made goods. Okay, I'm trying to, as I dive into this, when I was reading this, Canada and Mexico, in all practical purposes, are excluded from this because there's already the other tariffs that are out there on Canada and Mexico that have been previously put in place. But then once those go away, then
they'll be subject to the 10%.
Right. I think it actually calls out 12% in this. But there is a carve out, like if the goods qualify for USMCA, then it actually doesn't apply, which, hopefully most goods do. So that's when we're talking rules of origin and things like that. So I don't know how many Canadian made goods don't qualify for USMCA. I'm not the expert on that, but
if it's if it qualifies for USMCA or CUSMA, let's say, going to Canada, are they giving the same treatment?
I don't think so.
I haven't been able to see.
So theirs just feels a lot more retaliatory than what we're doing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why are they doing that?
That's a tough one.
Okay. Well,
because it does feel like.
I mean, I know they're upset.
When we originally put some stuff out there, Canada retaliated. We pulled back, but I don't think they really ever did. Right?
Didn't. No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So there's a lot of games going
politics on. Politics was the answer.
Politics.
Okay. All right. No, that's interesting. So we're talking about the coming into the U.S., but it only matters if it's over $800, right?
Yes, for now. And I think that might be a good episode to talk about next.
All right. Well, hey, this was exciting and entertaining as always, and looking forward to our next episode where we are going to talk about de minimis and the actual impact, what we're seeing, what we think is going to happen. This one's going to be a fun one. All right. See you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.